Okay, so we have an Iron Whiz qualifier coming in, so that you can tune to, and you will get to know who has actually made it to the final round. And just for a sake, this time this is a bit different. We get 5 people from each of the regions. So from APAC, from EMEA, and as well as from US, North American region, we'll have five qualifiers. So you get to see lots of people, maybe from India as well. I'm hoping to see some people from there. And apart from this, one last thing that I want you all to know is that whatever Varun is going to tell us today, that's really out of the box thing. Mathematics we have been using, but we haven't seen its real application. So you can see how he uses it and how he molds it to use and build those data visualization. And why I'm pitching this right now, because whatever he's going to tell you on that content itself, we are going to have some questions put there for you, and you can answer them and you can win Tableau swags. So you need to hear him very precisely. Okay. So I won't take much more of your time. I think we are already 10 minutes up 1 p.m. So Varun, take the stage. Please tell us about yourself and please go through your content now.
Yeah, sure. So, hello everyone, and thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to present this topic with you. And let me just share my screen. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, Varun, go ahead.
Yeah, great. So, welcome everyone. So, this is mathematics behind the scene for Tableau custom charts. And this is going to be part one because I mean, the topic is very big and I started to uh, at least, bring it in parts to everyone. So, this is part one. And here we would like to, talk about some custom charts that you can see everywhere in the community and how actually they are built, right? The actual math behind the scenes. So, I mean, I'm sure you must have all had some ideas of great charts or maybe complex chart, like maybe Sankey's or etc. And you either find a template online or you try to build them yourself. And I mean, there are limitations to everything. If you have a template, you cannot customize it to your liking. And maybe you can get lost in the template as well. It happened to me a lot of time. So it's better to have some basic understanding of how these charts are actually created. And, you know, then you can create almost any kind of custom charts that you want if you have the basics in hand. Right? That is like my primary motive into bringing this topic to everyone, right? Yeah, so next, talk a little bit about me. So, I mean, Person already has said some things. I'm a data scientist at PwC, and I did my Bachelor of Science in Mathematics and Scientific Computing from IIT Kanpur. In India, folks might know that uh, college, but yeah. If it's not evident already, I love making visits on Tableau. So there are some of the snapshot here as well, and there are a lot of things on my Tableau public profile. So do visit. You can just search Varun Jain on Tableau Public and you can find me there, right? I've been a Tableau Public featured author this year, and I have two Viz of the Days to my credit. One of those we will be creating today, one chart out of one of those Viz of the Days. I hope uh, you will be excited about that, right? Finally, I am incoming full-time Tableau developer, right? This change of career, I'm really excited about it. And yeah, let's go into it. Also, like if you want to follow me on and uh, get to know about my content, etc., you can follow me on Twitter. I share my visualizations, everything on Twitter at this handle. Let's go ahead, and I want to make a simple clarification. This is not a math class. So, I mean, there's no Greek letters, no complex equation, and definitely no homework to you. Right. Prasan has said to, listen very carefully, but I mean, it's not that tough that you'll have to, take notes or anything. But I do recommend after this talk, go and practice some of these concepts in your visits. That is going to help the concepts to stick to you. That's it. Right. Yeah. Moving on. So, okay, we're going to view some visits. This is how I learned Tableau. I just go to Tableau Public, look into some visits, break them down, see how is everything going on behind the scenes. And just want to do similar thing here. We'll view some visits, we see what works, what does not, and take it from there. So yeah, first is this is Escher's Gallery by Wendy Shija. So she's like a math wizard in the community. I know most of you have heard about her, and you can see the viz itself. It's like this interlocking polygons just joining together. So it's very mesmerizing. And yeah, it looks, I mean, insanely hard to create, right? Anything similar to this, right? And yeah, I mean, but you can see like it's just six-sided polygons joined together in an interlocking manner. And yeah, let's look at another one. This is again, this is by Samuel Parsons. He's one of my favorite authors. He created this crazy looking visualizations. So yeah, this one is for social good. And you can see what it is, right? It's like a web thing. And I mean, it says that, okay, don't look at me, don't try to understand me. I'm very complex, uh, but you can see like it's just some layers built on top of each other. We have circles, then we have these lines here, then we have sigmoid charts connecting those things, then there are arc things like that. So essentially it's simple concepts layered on top of each other to create something like this, right? And yeah, another is I really like this one. This was by CJ Mays. He was an RNVS finalist last year, and he just created some crazy visits. So this one is what you call a Bezier curve, and this bump chart. I mean, ah, it's very complicated looking. I mean, that's one thing that we can get from all these visits, right? So first of all, they are awesomely designed. They have a great visual mapping, and of course, they look very insanely hard to create in Tableau. But one thing that I would like you all to take away from this talk is that, I mean, these complex looking charts are only based on some math that you and I all we have learned at some point in our education, maybe high school, maybe I don't think so, but maybe in undergraduate studies, anything. But you have encountered everything. We all have learned trigonometry, our share of trigonometry, whatever it is. We learned the XY plane. We know how to plot points. We know how to, how curves work, the equations of different types of curves. We all know that. But uh, yeah, the main art is to get that math working in Tableau and also having a great visual mapping that make that math uh, good to actually use in a database, right? That is where the major art of it lies. So I mean that thing, the visual mapping thing, I mean that comes from inspiration. I'm sure all of us have great ideas at some point and haven't done it because we don't know the math or maybe don't know how to apply it in Tableau. And that's where I come in. I will try to see how you can take the math to Tableau, how to know which type of math do you really need to create visualizations, and then you can take your imagination from there, right? Cool. So let's look at the agenda. So this is not today's agenda. This is how I think about this whole series. So first part is about plotting the points. So we talk about basic plotting, how to create simple charts based on map layers, how to you know create linear visits, nothing complicated, nothing very fancy, but something that is at the basics of it all. And of course, like this, only these concepts allow us to create some awesome visits that we can think of. Right. Second, then moving on, we go into trigonometry, right? We think about radius and angles and sine, cos, and all of those things. And yeah, we see how concepts like these helps us create, curvy charts, circles, arcs, and those kinds of things. One thing to note here is that I do think that trigonometry word itself scare a lot of people and say, okay, we don't remember that and we don't want to work with it. But through a careful process, we can, exclude trigonometry from most of the things, right? We can just think of in terms of radius and angles and ha- basically having the right thinking about this type of visits will helps us exclude trigonometry to a very small portion that you don't even have to uh, understand. You just have to learn, right? And finally, fun with curves. So this is about plotting any and every kind of charts that you can have. that you can in Tableau. So sigmoids, part of a circle, Bezier curves, any kind of curve essentially for which you have an XY mapping, right? You can plot it in Tableau, and we can see how. I mean, we can see how how we can create a process to help us plot any kind of curve that we want, right? Yeah, but today's focus mostly is on plotting the points. It's not going to be very heavy in terms of math itself. We are going to build some basic concepts on how to create charts using map layers, and having that level of customization in our business, right? We would not go into trigonometry. We would not going into any fancy curves right now. We learned some math on the way, right? We will be learning some math tidbits, as I call it, and we can see how those simple pieces of math can help us create some neat visualizations. Yeah, and with that, we come to another wiz time. So this time we'll see some wizzes that are linear, right? They don't and have any kind of a circular component to it, which uses map layers, and which wizzes that we can create after the concepts that I will talk about in this talk, right? So let's move on to the next one. Yeah, so this one is again by Wendy Shija, right? So this is a bar slope kind of a chart, which actually is on a map, right? So all these are provinces in China, and the actual bar chart is at the position where the province lies actually, right? This you cannot create like using the standard bar chart, or if you are very creative, you create like 20-30 bar charts and arrange them like that. I would not suggest that. That is not optimal, but yeah, this is something you have to understand how to plot the points and how to use map layers to create these kind of things. Secondly, this is one of my ways, right? This is one which we will be creating today, right? This is a tree map, which is again plotted in a map kind of a thing. This is India's map, by the way, and these are all the states. And this tree map shows groundwater levels, how many zones are unsafe, how many are safe, how many are critical, these kind of a thing. Again, you cannot create this, I mean, natively in Tableau. You need to know some basics of um, map layers and plotting to create these, right? And yeah, that brings us to first concepts of our day of today, which is the Cartesian plane, right? So Cartesian plane, if you haven't heard about this is a term you can use to pretend you are quite smart. Mathematicians do it all the time. This is just the XY plane, right? You can call it Cartesian plane, you can call it XY plane, but it is something we have encountered. We have encountered at some point in our life, right? XY coordinates just tells us the distance from the origin and the horizontal distance and vertical distance respectively. So 10, 6 would be at 10 units horizontally from origin and 6 units vertically from origin. And origin, by the way, is this center point. I haven't marked it, but yeah, it's where the axis connects. Scatter plot, of course, is one chart that natively use this. So this scatter plot is, I mean, you don't have to know what we are plotting, but essentially these are data points where the x-axis have, some value, y-axis has some value, and we have let me exit the presentation mode. Yeah, and we have a kind of a dimension on detail. So this way you can plot a scatter plot, right? It's pretty simple, where each point has a x coordinate, which is 4472 in this case, and 4056 in this case. So this is not something that you haven't encountered yet. So yeah, screen. Building a map layer linear viz. This is the basic process that I follow, and this kind of condense the complexity to a minimum, right? So it does say building a map layer linear viz, but this process you can apply to any kind of a viz that includes curves as well, right? I will point out where you will need to make some changes to encounter to embed curves in them, right? But I mean, this is the basic process that we use. You choose your anchors, you create densification, you define points, and you finally plot them on Tableau, right? We'll talk about what all these things mean, right? Okay. Yeah, so let's move on to anchors. So what are anchors, right? So anchors, I mean, this system that I created, I like to think of them as anchors, but yeah, you can think of them as the minimum repeatable unit in a map layer chart, right? So these are the points on the plane around which the chart emerges as a repeatable unit. For example, if you look at this particular snapshot of a viz that we saw earlier, each anchor can be at the center of tree map or at the bottom of tree map, because around that the viz is kind of repeatable, right? It's just plotting a tree map around that particular anchor, right? So this is a repeatable unit. Similarly, this particular chart, it's not a map layer, but it's like a grid based chart. So here also the anchor would be at the center of here, around which we plot these symbols or circles or points or these arcs, right? So anchors you can think of as a kind of a dimension for map layer chart. So when you create, for example, you create a bar chart, you can add a dimension to the rows or columns and have that chart in place. But in map layer, you don't have the luxury to do that. So you create your own custom dimension and we call them anchors, right? They can be, in this case, it states, in this state, it's chess pieces, as you can see, right? So yeah. And let's look at some examples how to identify anchors in any kind of this, right? Okay, this is the same chart I just bought out in uh, alone right now here, right? So this is the actual chart, and these are all the anchors that are in the chart. So anchors are all the states that we are talking about, and yeah, we have some 29, 30 anchors here around which the tree maps are being built, right? Just to take a deep how the points are actually like plotted around anchors. So I have plotted the anchors here. You can see I have already plotted a label here, which is just to the left of anchor. Then we have some boxes here that depends on the data points that we have on these states, right? We can see how like everything is around the anchor itself, and that would help us, create that viz, right? I can hide anchor and here the viz is right. We'll see how we are going to plot all these points later. But yeah, let's go to the next example. Yeah, this is one of my other visualizations I created for Back to Viz Basics. This talks about a survey about homosexuality in these 20 something countries and how many people have responded to it, right? So each arc, if you say, is one country, and the colors are the proportion of people who have voted for the question, right? So bright red is, I mean, yes, then this magenta small arc is no opinion, and this dark purple is no, right? Anchors here. So anchor here is this point, right? Around this, we can plot all the arcs, the semicircle, if you will. But one thing to note here is that it's not a single anchor. We have one anchor for each country here plotted at the same point. So if I just show you, this is one arc, which is the outermost arc of this viz, and the anchor here is this for it, right? You go to another arc. Okay, this is another country, but the anchor is different, but it's at the same point, right? Because it's a dimension for us, right? Because country is a natural dimension for this chart, and we try to build them in the anchor itself. Another example, yeah, this is a viz I created for, I guess, diversity in data. It's very similar to the Samuel Parsons viz. I actually wanted to create something similar. So yeah, in this case, the anchors, since this is a layered graph, so we have first a shape layer, then a sigmoid layer, then again a bubble layer, similar things like that. The anchor is also on a scale, on a layered level. So for these 8 symbols here, the anchor is at the center. For these bubble charts here, the anchor is these shapes respectively. Then again, for these lines, the anchor is in the center. Again, for this outer plot, the anchor is again at the center, right? So yeah, I guess you can think of anchor as something you can clearly see as a dimension in the chart, right? Especially in cases like this, where the dimension is straight away clear to us as the states. In this, where the anchor is, clearly seen as a as a country, right? So it's not tough to visualize it, right? You can see what kind of a dimension that the chart follows and call that as an anchor, right? And this brings us to our first math bit of the day. So this is called translation, transformation, or simply shifting of the origin. This is very closely related to anchors and how do they work, right? So let's talk about the math first. Consider a point P on the Cartesian plane, x comma y. And suppose we want to shift our origin from its actual place to some random point, say O dash with the coordinates x dash comma y dash. So the new coordinates of P according to this origin would be x minus x dash and y minus y dash. It's very easy to see why this is right. So if P has a point x comma y from as per this origin, that means the horizontal distance, this is x and this is y. Similarly, O dash has coordinates x dash y dash. So this horizontal distance is x dash, this is y dash. So this little distance, which is x minus x dash and y minus y dash, is the final position of P as per this shifted origin, right? So there is another way to look at it, which is the converse of this theorem, if you will, which is this way, right? So we actually say that, okay, we already have shifted our origin, we already have a point in place and the coordinates as per this origin, and we want to shift the origin back to its place at 0, 0. So what would be the final points of P? It's very similar. It's x plus x dash and y plus y dash. Again, you can see why this happens. This distance is x. This distance is x dash. So the whole distance is x plus x dash, right? So let's remember this particular two formulas, if you will. So if you shift the origin to x comma x dash comma y dash, you have to subtract that value from the point to get the new points. And if you already have shifted origin, if you want to shift the origin back to its place, so you just add the anchors um, coordinates, right? So why this is useful to us is because um, since we have seen like anchors, right? Around that the chart is repeatable, if you will, right? So if we consider our anchors, if we shift our anchors to say origin, we can plot the points around it pretty easily, because plotting a point around origin is intuitively easier than to any random point, right? So we can plot the points around the anchor, imagining it as the origin. And then if we want to shift the origin back to its place, we just use this transformation to get our final points, right? This makes the plotting of the points itself a little easier, especially when you are dealing with complex curves or arcs or whatever, right? Those kind of things. Linearly, it's still easy to do that, but if you go into curves or that kind of territory, it's difficult to plot around some random points x dash comma y dash. That's why we use this straight bit to first plot the points around origin and then shift the origin back to its original place. Right. Yeah. So next step, if you remember from our this slide, we choose our anchors. The next step would include creating densification. So densification, at least I know I was like very terrified of it when I first heard about it. It can be a little tricky because it's pushing the Tableau's limits to a bit. But what densification is, you just need to understand only one line, which is the number of points you really need to plot on the canvas for each data point that you have, right? These two are different. Points could be, if you are plotting a box, for example, you need 4 points, but the size of that box might depend on only one data point, right? So for each data point, in that case, you need 4 points. If you are drawing kind of an arc, you might need like 50 points to create that arc, but the data point is still one. So that gives you a densification of like 50 points. So how to identify what densification you need? You just calculate the number of points around an anchor and then divide it by the number of data points for each anchor. And we'll see some examples later on. How to use densification. So we usually create a densification file. So how many points that you encounter, that you calculate here, you just create a densification file with that many rows and cross join it with our usual, the data that you are using. Right. Cross join, if you guys don't, those of you who don't know, it's a Cartesian join. It essentially joins the left data with the right, with all the rows of the right data set, essentially creating a data set with the number of rows as the multiplication of the rows of the previous two data, right? And it, so if you, for example, you have a data set of 100 points, you need densification of like 4 points. You create a densification file of 4 rows, you cross join, so that way you get 4 into 100. It is 400 points instead of 100. That way you essentially created, extra points, because for each data point you need to have some extra points because you need to plot them, right? Let's look at some examples real quick. So this is Yeah, okay. I usually use a 5-step process, very simple process to identify densification. First is to draw, visualize, or sketch, depending on your imaginary power, the chart around any one of the anchor. So for here, you can see around one anchor, I brought out the tree map like this, right? So we then count the number of data points to be visualized. So here the data points are all these different colors. So these colors represent the percentage of zones with groundwater levels, right? So black is like worst level, low groundwater levels, and then blue is like good level, right? So here we have 5 data points for each of these colors. Then you count the number of points to be plotted for the chart. Since all of this is a quadrilateral or a four-sided rectangle, right? That way, if you see on the right, you need to plot 4 points for each of the box. So that would give you 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4, that is 20 points. Then you calculate the number of densification points using this formula at the center. That would give you 20 divided by 5 equals 4. So your densification that you need is just 4. So how do you create densification file? Just create an Excel sheet, right? Have 4 rows in it and single column with A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4, however you like. Right, that give you the densification file. Then you can cross join it with your usual data that you are working with. Similarly, let's look at another example. This chart we already have seen, right? Then again, use the first step, draw, visualize, sketch the chart around any one of the anchor. This is the chart. Actually, it should have 2 more arcs of the other 2 colors, but I mean, the space was not there. So you can visualize 3 arcs like these, right? And count the number of data points. So we have 3 data points, one for each color, right? So we have 3 data points, number of points to be plotted. Since this is a curve and Tableau does not draw curves, as you all might know, we have to plot a lot of points and add some lines between them so that overall it looks like a curve. So in the bottom, there is 30 points. At the top, there is 30 points, and all these are joined by a polygon mark, right? Similarly, this 60 points for other 2 arcs of the other 2 color. So in total, we will have like 180 points here, right? This 30, 30, I have selected arbitrarily because it looks a lot curvy using 30 points. If you use less, it looks blocky. And if you use more, it might, add additional load to Tableau, right? So you can just see how many points that you might need, right? So in case I picked 60 for each of the arcs, so that would give me 180 points total. And the number of densification again would be 180 number of points divided by data points, which is 3, again 60. So our densification file would be 60 rows long and have a single column. And we can use and create an Excel file with columns 1 to 6, with rows 1 to 60 and these values in there. That would be our densification file. Again, you can cross join it with your usual table and have the final data set ready for plotting. And just quickly, another example for densification. This is one of the charts I created for diversity data. It's essentially a scatter plot, but there is this line that tells you the distance of the point from the scatter plot, right? It's about occupations where, I mean, the difference in median salary between genders, right? And all these are different occupations. So what are the anchors here? We haven't talked about the anchors here, right? The anchors here are essentially all these points itself. So I've drawn the chart around one anchor as per our step, right? We count the number of data points. So data points is just one, this particular coordinate, which is men's salary, comma, women's salary, right? And then we see a number of points we need to plot. So essentially we need 2 points, this one and this, because then only we can join them with a line, right? So the densification that you need here would be 2 divided by number of data points, that is 1, which is 2. So your densification file would be simple, just 2 rows long and have a single column. You can add one A, B, 1 or 2 or anything that you want, right? Now, I hope that we all are pretty familiar with how to identify anchors or densification for our map layer chart. And that brings us to the third step, which is defining the points itself. So it's again, you can drill it down to 3 more steps. The first step would be, that is where, the math that we talked about works, right? First step would be bring the anchor to the origin, assume the anchor is at origin, right? Then step 2, define the calculations around that anchor, right? So for each data point and the densification that you created, you will have the calculations around each data point. So we'll see later and with an example how we do that. But this step needs to, you need to, take a pen or paper, I don't know, just write down the calculation for each data points that you are going to plot around only one of the anchors. Right here, you can use basic arithmetic. If you are trying to draw a curve chart or a sigmoid or anything else, you need that math knowledge there, but this is the step where you do that. Step 3 is bring the anchor back to its original position, bring the origin back to its actual position, and perform that transformation that we see here, this transformation. And then you get the final points that you need to plot on the Tableau. Right. This is how you define the points. I mean, this is where most of the math comes, and it's not, a math that anyone can teach. It's just multiplication, addition, simple basic arithmetic you need for each of the data points that you need to plot. Right. After that comes plotting the points on the Tableau itself. But before that, let's look at one thing that Tableau does for us natively, and we want to employ that in our map layer chart. So this is just a simple bar chart that I created from some data set. Right. So you can see the top, the maximum, the x-axis, y-axis goes is 240K. Right. So suppose I want to create something like 1,000 times more. This is another pin. Then the chart itself scales. This bar chart that used to be around 230 something, 230K something, it should be a little longer, right? When you multiply it by 1,000, but Tableau scales the chart itself to the length or the width of the screen, right? You can also change that width if you like. Let me do that. Right, so Tableau does all the scaling for us, but when we are plotting a map layer chart, since every point that is being shown on the screen is plotted by us, we need to take care of the scaling also, right? And that brings us to another math concept, which we call as restriction transformation, or simply scaling, right? We call it restriction because usually we use it to restrict or expand a curve or a point or anything on the Cartesian plane, right? So let's talk math here a little bit. You have some point on the Cartesian plane, x comma y coordinates, right? It's at a distance of d from the origin. And so you want another point, right, which is similar to p, but at a distance of d dash. Then what should be the point? What should be the coordinates of the new point? It's x times d dash by t, right? It's just a simple ratio of these two distances and multiplied by the actual point that we have already, right? It's pretty easy to see why this happens, right? xd dash by d and yd dash by d. Now, a more relevant application of this theorem, if you will, or this transformation is, suppose you are plotting a point on the Cartesian plane, but you don't care about where the point itself is, right? You are working in a kind of a box in the coordinate plane, right? So if the box of length 2L, why 2L? Because I mean, if there is an L here, there should be an L at the negative y-axis and similarly on the negative x-axis, right? So it does not matter, right? Suppose you are working in a bounding box like this with a side length of L or 2L, and you have a point in that, right? Now that point could be at a length FL, where F is a fraction, so it should be at a fraction of a distance from origin. Right. Now what you want to do is you don't care where the point P is. You want to just reduce the bounding box, right? You want to reduce the box to a position L dash. It can be less, it can be more also, right? And you just want that the point here is at the same relative position at the previous one. Then the final point P dash would be X L dash by N and Y L dash by L in the similar fashion as we see before, right? Where L dash is the final length, L is the initial length. Why this is more relevant than this is because in this case, we don't have to care about where exactly P lies. There can be any point Q at some other distance. There can be a point R at some other distance. But as long as the relative position remains same between these two states, right, you can find the final points in this particular transfer after doing this particular transformation, right? And this really helps because if you're trying to draw something around an anchor, right, and you have values like in hundreds or thousands or whatever, and you plot those points, you create a bar chart or a tree map or any kind of chart. But when you are plotting all the anchors on the screen with all their charts, you don't want that 1,000 to be there, right? You want to restrict it to some manageable box, like a 1 unit box or 2 unit box or a half-unit box, depending on the scale you want, right? And you don't have to then work with every point and try to modify every point so that it fits. You just need to know the initial bounding box. You just need the final box, and you can apply this transformation to all the points there, right? Reduce the thinking and the work on our side. Yeah. With this out of the way, our final step is actually plotting, right? And and since you have defined all the points, right, we just need to plot them on Tableau, right? A few things that we need to keep in mind here, since we are working with make point. If you don't know about make point, it is used to create points on a map, right? So using make point, you can uh, kind of mimic the usual coordinate plane. But what happens with make points is it takes the values in terms of latitude and longitude. And if you think about latitude is essentially the y-axis because it tells the distance from equator, vertical distance, and latitude is the horizontal distance. So anything that you are plotting in make point is going to be y comma x instead of the Cartesian point x comma y. And we'll talk about that, right? One thing that happens with make point is that whatever you are plotting in this bracket, sorry, whatever you are putting in this bracket, that does not should not have a table calc or a window function or a LOD or anyways any other. I mean, if you join two data set and use fields from both of them, the make point doesn't work, right? So if you need to do any kind of this calculation, it's better to have it already in Tableau Prep or Excel or any kind of pre-processing that you use typically, right? Second point is use parameters. So as I said, right, you need to, since you are plotting all the points, you would have some spacings and some little adjustments that you have in plotting the points. Also, since we are essentially thinking about points around one anchor and then putting all the anchors in place, you might need to check scaling and all these things, proportion and all these things. So it's better to not have a fixed quantity about this and use parameters so that when you actually plot all the points, you can see, okay, what works, what does not work, modify the widths, the height, the scales, and everything using parameters, right? Makes our work easier. And third is take one things at a time. That is very important because map layer visits can get pretty complicated. I know I have worked in created charts that contains as much as like 20 or 25 map layers in one sheet. So yeah, it can get pretty complex, but I mean, just take one step at a time. Do all the things carefully with focus, and everything would be pretty manageable. Yeah, I mean that concludes the actual process that we follow, and I just want to show you an example of all this in action. Right from the beginning till the plotting in Tableau and having the final map in place. Right. So we are going to create this particular chart that I showed earlier. Let me pull it up again. This one, right? And this is a tree map. Let me just talk through about what actually is happening here. So for each state, all these are states. We have like several zones in each state, and we are actually have a data which tells about, okay, how many of these zones have over exploited groundwater, how many have critical, semi-critical, safe, saline, right? And this is what we are plotting for a tree map, right? You already saw the anchors here, anchors in this chart. Yeah, so each anchor is at this position, right? Let me just remove all the other things. Yeah, so we got our anchors here. These are all the anchors which actually you have to get this data by yourself. Anchors, you can either create your own this plotting, or you can get from if anybody has done it before or not, right? Finally, we also see what densification do we need here. In this case, we need densification as 4, right? We have created a densification file which has like 4 rows with A to D as the as the 4 rows in one column, right? And now we will define the points here, right? So let me just give me a second. Let me expand this. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so okay, so few things to keep in mind here. Since we are building everything from scratch, we have to start with a natural border or a bounding box, right? So in this case, the visual mapping, let's talk about visual mapping a little bit. In this case, what's happening is there is two basically blocks here, the left block and the right block. Left block is made up of three sub blocks, if you will, and right blocks is made up of two. The width of left one would be the number of unsafe zones divided by total zones. The width to right is number of zones that are not unsafe divided by total, right? This could go, the width can go from 0 to 1 because you might have like all a state with all safe zones, right? Similarly, this can go from 0 to 1. That gives us a natural X border along the X-axis as 2 units. Similarly, the blocks here, the height is for like light gray. This represents semi-critical zones. So the height would be the number of semi-critical zones divided by number of unsafe zones. So all these three would add up to 1 unit. Similarly, here would add up to 1 unit. So we have a kind of a natural border around this. 2 units on the x-axis, 1 unit on the y-axis. Again, we have a parameter in place for the height, right? I'm not assigning anything to it right now. We can work with the parameter itself. Similarly, we have parameter between width between these two blocks. I'm sure it might not be visible, but there is a little bit, right? We can see when we are plotting this, right? Next, we assign anchor at origin, which we did. It actually is at some x a comma y a point, right? We don't want to think about that right now. We just think that anchor is at origin, right? And right, another thing, control spacing with parameters that we will do. And finally, after plotting all the points, we will apply the tidbit 2, which is a restriction transformation, and then apply tidbit 1, which is the translation transformation or shifting the origin to obtain the actual points to plot. Right, moving quickly ahead. And yeah, let's pick one of the block and point it and plot it, right? So I have picked up the lower bottom one about semi-critical, and you can see, like, if you have something to plot around 0, 0 origin, you can plot all the points very easily. So this point is at a distance of width parameter, which is a parameter from the y-axis. So this x-coordinate would be minus p times width, y-coordinate will be p times height. Similarly, B, this would share the y coordinate with A because they are at similar height level, vertical level. So y coordinate is height. X coordinate would be whatever this x coordinate is minus whatever the width is. So width would be unsafe, right? This particular parameter calculation. Unsafe here is number of percent of unsafe districts, like we already talked about. Similarly, you can plot C. C would share the x coordinate with V because they are at similar horizontal distance, right? Minus p width minus unsafe minus p width minus unsafe. Then height would be whatever the y coordinate of B is plus the height of this box, which is p height plus semi-critical. Right, semi-critical is number of semi-critical zones divided by number of unsafe zones. Essentially, we plot all these 4 points, right? Easy to plot, nothing complicated here. Similarly, and that is partly because our anchor is at origin, right? Suppose it's at some place called x comma y, then we'll have to adjust that at every place. We don't have to do it here, right? Next, we take another example. This is the last one I'm going to take. Not going to plot each and every one. So this one is about critical zones. So yeah, you can see the bottom 2 points would coincide with the top 2 points of the previous one. So that I copied from before. This one's x-axis will again be shared with this point. The y-axis would be y-axis of this plus the height, which is critical, number of critical by number of unsafe. Similarly, we point all these 4 plots. Similarly, we point all these 20 points, right? Now what we have to do is we have to actually do our transformations, right? First, we'll scale this back to a unit to a bounding box that we want. Then we bring the origin back, right? So yeah, let's do the first step. The current box has got as 2 units width and 1 unit height. Our final parameters for the scaling, I'm taking 2 different scalings here because there are 2 different widths here, right? So we have scaling X and scaling Y parameters, save some default values to them, and then calculate the updated points. These 2, if you remember, we are taking from this tidbit. It would be x L dash by L and y L dash by L. So yeah, so x L dash, which is the final length to the x-axis, is the scaling x. Final length to the y-axis is scaling y. So x dash x L dash by L. The L is actually 2 for x coordinate, and y L dash by L, which is 1. So this is our updated point using the scaling transformation that we saw. Then now, since we have everything scaled out, we bring the origin back to its place, and then we know the anchor position is would be, if the origin at its actual place would be x a comma y. Then we quickly apply this transformation, x plus anchor position, y plus anchor position, and here, just this one here. And we get the final points, which would be x dash plus xa, y dash plus ya. We plug in x dash and y dash from here, and we get our final points, x dash scaling x by 2 plus xa. Like this is the final point, right? So you can see we first plotted everything around anchor, assuming it as origin, right? It was very easy to do. Then we apply scaling as we wanted, right? We assign parameters to it because you will see that when we will plotting this on Tableau that it might not be exactly pointed that we want. We might have to, tune it a little, right? And then we bring the anchor back to its original position. And this is how we get the final positions. After this is done, we just need to take everything from here to Tableau, right? Again, similar things that we need to remember. Map layer is different from regular Cartesian planes. We have latitude, longitude discussions that we have already. We make sure to not have any table calc or anything to calculate the points. We need to understand how densification comes into play. We haven't used densification yet, right? We created a densification file, but we haven't actually used how to we haven't actually seen how to do it. We will when we will actually be creating it in just a minute, right? Finally, leverage parameters, which we are already doing. So this is going to be our final product, and let me just remove this altogether, right? And we will try to bring it from start, which won't take a lot of time, right? First, let's pull out all the parameters that we need. So height, scaling, x, and width. You can see at the bottom here, show parameter. We just give them some default values. So width can take 0.2, scaling we give 0.8 and 0.8 to everything, height also 0.2, and let's see, right? Um, Talking about densification just here. So we have created one file with one column called path. This column have 4 values, A, B, C, D, and this we cross joined, right? So A, B, C, D would serve us as the 4 points of each block, like we see here, right? A, B, C, and D this way. Going back, removing this, let me just show you how I calculated the semi-critical points. So if you remember the point, this is the y coordinate for A, which we found as height. Also, if you remember, A and B shared their y coordinate. Let me just show you here. Shared their y coordinate, so I don't have to create a separate calculation for each of these, right? So just, you know, A and B has the same y coordinate as height. We just created this calculation. Then we know A and D has the same x coordinate, which is minus width. We created this. Similarly, B and C have the similar x coordinate, which is minus width minus unsafe. And similarly, the final C and D, height plus semi-critical. Now we are going to tell Tableau that for each densification, how do we want our points to be? So for x coordinate and
Varun, just to interrupt you, I think you're just sharing the Tableau screen. So whenever you are editing the calculation to show the calculation, it's not popping up. We are not able to view it.
Okay, let me just share my whole screen. That should work. Let me know when you can see this. maybe I have to remove Tableau from full screen. Can you see the screen now, Prasanth?
Yes, we can see the screen. Can you edit a calculation right now?
Can you see the calculation?
No,
Varun, what you have
maybe.
to do is maybe stop sharing and share back
Yeah,
again with instead of just Tableau.
yes,
Yeah,
the whole screen.
cool. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it should be visible now.
Yes, we can
Yes.
see it.
Okay, great. Yeah. So yeah, let me just start again, right? So yeah, so we were talking about plotting the points, right? We know that A's y coordinate is height, and also it's also the y coordinate for B as well. If you just look at it again, right? A and B share the same y coordinate, which is height. A and D share the same x coordinate. Then similarly, B and C share the same x coordinate, and C and D share the same y coordinate. P height is semi-critical. So we'll just save some time in calculating, right? Nothing complicated. So A and B have the same y coordinate, which is height. Uh, A and D has same coordinate, x coordinate, which is minus width. B and C have same coordinate, which is minus width minus unsafe. And C and D similarly, right? You can see that we are doing everything keeping or anchor as origin, right? We haven't included anything right now, right? Now we will include the densification. So how we will include, we will tell Tableau that for each densification point, plot the point that we want it to plot. So for A, we want it to plot the x coordinate of A. For B, we want to plot the y coordinate of B. From C for D, right? So for example, if you don't want to plot a rectangle or you want to plot a pentagon or a hexagon, then you have E and F here again, right? And if you want to plot something like a curve, then you might go from 1 to 60, right? Then this might not be, if else would not be the best thing to do there, but I mean, the concept is similar, right? So we told Tableau that, okay, given the densification points A, B, C, D, this is how the x coordinates would look like. Then we go to Y and we do the same thing, right? Then it's A, show A is Y, then B is Y, then C is Y, and D is Y. Now we calculate the final point. The point would be inside a make point calculation. This will help Tableau know that, okay, this is a map based chart. So what we did, we actually plotted this formula. We already have X and Y in place. We have XA and YA, which is the anchor position, and we have the scalings. We just have to plot this particular formula, and which is exactly here. So we have first the y coordinate, because like we talked about, make point is opposite of Cartesian plane. So we have y coordinate into scaling plus anchor position. And similarly, x coordinate into scaling by 2 because L dash by L and anchor x. And this gives us the semi-critical point. Similarly, I created all the points in similar fashion for saline, safe, overexploited, critical, all the things, right? So let's first, I guess, plot the anchor itself. We have the anchor in place, right? Then we go and yeah, let's say we plot semi-critical first. We add the map layer here, right? We tell the map, okay, we don't want any actual map there, we go to none. Okay, then all this combines together. We'll see how we fix it, right? So essentially, we haven't told Tableau that, okay, these anchors are different for each of these states. So we just put that particular level of detail here. We told, okay, everything is for state, change it to maybe a circle, and we have plotted it. Similarly, for semi-critical, this is supposed to be, okay, let's point a circle only, right? Hold it, okay. We need to tell it's different for every state, and also it's different for every path, which is a densification variable, right? And we actually want it to be a shape, filled shape. So we go to polygon. Now it looks weird, right? And we'll see why, because we have to tell the polygon that, okay, we want the joining of all these 4 points to be along the path variable. Since path is from A, B, C, D, that happens, that Tableau understand, okay, we first take A, then joins to B, then C, and then D. This way we get one of the points, right? Let's color it in a similar fashion. So let's do light gray. Similarly, we just pick the critical one and it's the same calculation, right? Critical Y into scaling Y divide plus anchor Y. Exactly similar, plot it on map layer. Make the same polygon, then get the level of details here, tell the path, and we get another box. Let's see that. Let's make it a little darker than before. Plot, overexploited next. Again, same steps, polygon. Let's make it a darker color. Let's make it black all through. Add state, add path. You get this, right? Next, let's do it quickly for safe and Saline as well. Save again, state code, polygon, path, and finally, the last set of points that we have. Let's give it a different color, a light blue here. And for safe, let's have this. Right now, it looks weird, right? That's because, I mean, if you just filter it to one state, let's click one state and see. I mean, it looks okay, right? There's a tree map. I mean, we can pick a better one, maybe. This one. Yeah, we have a tree map in place, but when we remove that filter and every anchor goes into its original place, it looks a little weird. That's where we have the parameters in place, right? We first say that, okay, the width between the two blocks is a lot. So let's just set it to a little less, maybe a little more less. That looks okay. The height is a lot and the width is not. So maybe reduce height by 1, right? Okay, this is X. Let's remove, decrease width by some point, height, and then width it was okay, right? So this way, just then hide the anchor, right? Maybe add one for the label. I don't have it right now with me, but we can add one points for the label itself, and we get what we want as a chart, right? Then it's just formatting, remove the headers and everything, right? Maybe remove the lines and everything here. Remove the grid lines. Then okay, looks pretty good, right? And it's also look very similar to what we see earlier in the actual viz here, if we just add the points, right? So you can see we break down this particular chart into simple concepts and actually build this through and through, right? Using those two math concepts that we saw. And the math concepts were also not very complicated or anything, right? And that is why, I mean, I think that, bringing everything to some manageable steps is very important to map layers business, because I mean, here you can have 5 or 6, it can get very complicated very soon, right? Yeah, we can look at a very simple example of this. This is one by Chimdi. So he's like a very awesome person in Tableau, right? He creates all these visualizations. And what's smart here is that you can see all these curves, right? But these are not really curves. These are actually shapes. So what he has done is he plotted every shape at 0,0 for each anchor, which is the anchor position itself. So here, first of all, the anchors are very simple, right? It is just the grid itself, right? He plotted all these shapes on the anchor itself, right? And he played with shapes itself. So show a different data point, he have some different curve or have a different color or have a different shape for it. And that also you can see a lot of times happens in map layer widgets, the points itself don't change with each anchor, but people play with color or shapes or I guess sizes to show the data points and how they vary. Right. What we did was a little complicated once in that thing. Right. So yeah, I guess this brings us to the end of the presentation itself. So we saw how we plotted the points and how to create a basic map layer chart. Next time when we talk about, I mean, maybe it would be in a talk like this or maybe in a blog or something. I'm really not sure at this point, but then we can talk about how to include curves in this, right? Talk normal circular charts and or maybe complicated curves like we want, right? Yeah, so thank you for listening to my presentation and yeah, stay tuned for further content. Right, you can follow me on Twitter. I will probably post something there after this, right? Maybe, and also I will share this whole workbook on Tableau Public, so you can download it and uh, just see what's happening under the hood and how all these charts are made. Yeah, so over to you,
Right.
Hassan.
That was like a splendid presentation, as well as how you actually broke up those pieces. That was really marvelous. Like it was hard at once, but once you get the idea of what is going on, then it's just simple, like placing those things and you'll have that visualization. And yes, that will really help if you can share that whole workbook with us. What sort of more fit into densification? So densification is mostly like you are actually replicating more points. So you can use that. Like there are various examples. Some of the examples Varun just showed us, and but you can play with that. Like if you want a line to be plotted, a curved line to be plotted on Tableau, then you can't do it with a single point. Then you need multiple points, and then you need the equation of the line so that you can build a particular smooth line. So any type of data, it doesn't matter what type of data it is. You just need to know how you can actually place those on the plane, on the XY plane. Right. So guys, if you have any questions, you can sure put through. But apart from this, it is the final quiz time, and we have very simple questions for you. And just one thing: whosoever answers first, and not the panelists, okay? You can't answer, and the co-leaders as well, okay?
Sure.
Okay, so you can't do that. But yes, apart from that, all the attendees here will place, we have 2 to 3 questions right here, and whosoever answers it in the chat box first gets some Tableau swag deliver at their doorstep. Okay, so let me share my screen. So it needs to be very quick. You need to be very quick. Okay, I'll be sharing my screen. So the first question is, what is the other name for XY plane? Like Varun used it so many times. Spelling needs to be correct. I can't do that. Okay, so we have a winner. Ansula, it's
Yeah, I'm
Abhilash, but
moderating. Yes, that is Abhilash Bhati.
okay.
Thanks, Abhilash. You're right as well.
Abhilash Bhati. Okay, so the very quick question answers. I really like that. So, okay, so whosoever hasn't won yet, so it's time for you to shine. Coming on to the next question. Name the term that defines the minimum repeatable unit of a visualization while using a Cartesian plane. This term was very much used again. Okay, we have a winner.
We have,
Yes.
yes.
And it's Satyabrata Manji.
Yes,
Am I correct here?
that's right. That's right,
Okay,
Prasanna.
fine. Okay, nice. Like you were very focused, I could say. And
I think
now coming
everybody
to
was focused. Most answers are right. So I think people were focused. It was a great
yes,
session, Varun, right?
right.
Okay.
Hmm, nice. Okay, so coming on to the last question, and that is name the process that lets you define the number of points you need to plot for each data point to build curves or polygons. We are waiting for the right answer. So yes, we got another winner. Gladens, you were you were right. I think 2 times, but you missed it by a second. I'm really sorry. So the third winner is Charan Kumar. Okay. I think we have got our 3 winners. So first one is Abhilash Bhati, Satya Manji, and Charan Kumar. I think we'll need your email IDs. So if you can
Yeah.
please send it to us, then we will contact you for further process. We'll need your address as well. So we'll contact you for that. And also we will be sharing the whole workbook, the link with you all so that you can go through it. I know it was a lot to consume. It was interesting, but it was a lot to consume. And I myself would like to go it another time and see how it all went. So thank you so much, everyone, for such a response. And thank you so much, Varun. It was such a great session, and I look forward to more sessions with us.
Hey, thanks, Prasan.
Fantastic session, Varun. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really fun for me as well.
Nice. Great that you enjoyed it. Okay, guys. So we'll meet, I think, soon again next month with some exciting event, and we'll try to have some more swags and quizzes alongside as well. And just one thing, if you want to look up to some of the quizzes, some of the events, Tableau French Festival is going to happen on 16th of December. So you can search for Tableau French Festival. Please register for it and participate. It will have lots of speakers, and it will have